In the heart of Chicago, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and people rushed through crowded streets, there lived a woman named Laura Bennett. She wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd. Her brown hair was always tied back neatly, and her clothes were simple, just like her job. Laura worked as an administrative assistant at Titan Tech Industries, a company known for its cutting-edge technology and ambitious projects. Every day she sat behind her desk, typing emails, organizing files, and managing schedules for her boss, Richard Carter. Richard was the CEO of Titan Tech, a man who liked to think of himself as a visionary leader. He had sharp features, a confident smile, and a reputation for being both brilliant and difficult to work with. To him, Laura was just another face in the office, a quiet, dependable employee who kept things running smoothly but never drew attention to herself. What Richard didn't know was that Laura had a secret life outside of work, one that would shock anyone who knew her only as the soft-spoken assistant. On weekends, when most people relaxed or spent time with family, Laura could be found in her garage. It was her sanctuary, filled with tools, spare parts, and half-finished machines. From a young age, she had loved taking things apart to see how they worked. Her father, a mechanic, had taught her everything he knew about engines. Over the years, Laura's passion grew into something extraordinary. She became a mechanical genius, capable of fixing anything from old cars to complicated machinery. But no one at Titan Tech knew about this side of her. To them, she was just Laura, the assistant. One Monday morning, the office buzzed with excitement. Titan Tech was unveiling its latest project, the Phoenix engine. It was supposed to be revolutionary, a machine that could generate energy more efficiently than anything else on the market. The entire team had been working on it for months, and today was the big day. A live demonstration was scheduled in the main conference room, and everyone gathered to watch. Laura stood at the back of the room holding a clipboard. She wasn't part of the engineering team, so she didn't expect to play any role in the event. Still, she was curious. As the engineers powered up the engine, she leaned forward slightly, her eyes scanning the machine. Something about it intrigued her. Even though she hadn't seen the blueprints, she noticed tiny details that seemed off. But before she could dwell on it, the unthinkable happened. The engine sputtered, then let out a loud screech before grinding to a halt. Smoke began to rise from its core, and the room fell silent. Everyone stared in disbelief. The engineers scrambled to figure out what went wrong, but after several tense minutes, they admitted defeat. They couldn't fix it. Richard stepped forward, his face red with frustration. "This is unacceptable," he shouted, glaring at the team. "We've poured millions into this project, and now we're stuck because none of you can solve a simple problem." The engineers exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. No one dared to argue with Richard when he was angry. He paced back and forth, muttering under his breath. Then, without warning, he turned to the crowd and made a flippant remark. Honestly, even a simple woman could do better than this. The room went quiet. People shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. Laura felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. She hated being underestimated, especially by someone like Richard, who thought he knew everything. Without thinking, she raised her hand. All eyes turned to her. Some looked surprised. Others smirked, assuming she was joking. Richard raised an eyebrow. "What is it, Laura?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Do you have a solution?" Laura hesitated for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'll fix it." For a second, the room was completely still. Then murmurs broke out as people whispered to each other. Richard chuckled, clearly amused. "All right, Laura," he said, crossing his arms. "Go ahead. Prove me wrong." He walked away, shaking his head, already dismissing her attempt as a waste of time. But Laura didn't care. She had accepted the challenge, and now she was determined to succeed. Little did Richard know, he had just dared a mechanical genius to prove herself, and she wasn't about to back down. That evening, Laura returned home, her mind racing with ideas. She logged into the company's database using her admin privileges and downloaded the blueprints for the Phoenix engine. As she studied them, her initial suspicions were confirmed. The engine wasn't just malfunctioning, it had a fundamental design flaw. Fixing it wouldn't be easy, but Laura thrived on challenges. Like this. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. In her garage, surrounded by tools and spare parts, she began sketching plans and brainstorming solutions. Hours passed, but Laura didn't notice. She was completely focused, her hands moving with practiced precision as she dismantled old machines for parts and tested different configurations. Meanwhile, at Titan Tech, word spread quickly about Laura's bold move. Some of her co-workers laughed, convinced she'd fail miserably. Others admired her courage, even if they doubted her chances. Richard, for his part, barely gave her a second thought. He assumed she'd give up once she realized how difficult the task was. But deep down, a small part of him wondered if maybe, just maybe, she might surprise him. As the days went by, Laura threw herself into the project. She requested access to the lab where the Phoenix engine was stored, citing her promise to fix it. Though skeptical, Richard granted her permission, partly out of curiosity and partly because he wanted to see her struggle. What he didn't realize was that Laura wasn't struggling at all. In fact, she was making remarkable progress. By the end of the week, Laura had identified the root cause of the problem and developed a plan to fix it. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Not as an assistant hiding in the shadows, but as a talented engineer stepping into the light. And so the stage was set. Laura Bennett, the quiet woman nobody expected much from, was about to take on one of the biggest challenges of her life. Unbeknownst to Richard Carter, he had inadvertently given her the chance to shine, and in doing so, he was about to learn a valuable lesson about underestimating people. The next morning, Laura arrived at Titan Tech earlier than usual. She carried a small bag with tools she had brought from home, along with notes she had scribbled late into the night. Her heart raced as she walked through the glass doors of the building. For the first time in years, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was stepping out of her comfort zone, leaving behind the quiet role she had played for so long. As she entered the lab where the Phoenix engine was stored, she took a deep breath. The machine stood in the center of the room, surrounded by wires and monitors. It looked intimidating, but Laura didn't let that bother her. She reminded herself of all the times she had fixed broken-down cars or rebuilt old engines in her garage. If she could handle those, she could handle this. Laura began by examining the engine closely. She ran her fingers over its surface, feeling for anything unusual. Then she opened a panel on the side and peered inside. Wires tangled together like a chaotic web, and tiny components gleamed under the fluorescent lights. To most people, it would have looked like a confusing mess, but to Laura, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. She spent hours studying the blueprints she had downloaded. The more she looked at them, the clearer the problem became. There was a flaw in the cooling system. A part designed to regulate heat wasn't functioning properly. This caused the engine to overheat and shut down. Laura realized that fixing it wouldn't just involve replacing a single part. She needed to redesign the entire system to make it work efficiently. While she worked, whispers spread throughout the office. Some employees stopped by the lab to catch a glimpse of Laura tinkering with the engine. They watched her silently, unsure what to think. A few snickered, convinced she was wasting her time. Others, however, were curious. They noticed how focused she was, how carefully she handled each component, and how confidently she moved around the machine. One afternoon, Richard Carter walked into the lab. He hadn't planned to check on Laura. He told himself he was just passing by. But he couldn't resist seeing how things were going. When he saw her hunched over the engine, tools in hand, he paused. For a moment, he forgot why he had come in. Instead, he found himself watching her. Laura didn't notice him at first. She was too busy adjusting a valve and testing its alignment. When she finally looked up, she saw Richard standing there, arms crossed and expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to see how you're progressing," Richard replied. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity. Any luck? Laura nodded. I've identified the issue. It's in the cooling system. I'm working on a solution. Richard raised an eyebrow. The cooling system? Are you sure about that? Yes, Laura said firmly. The blueprints confirm it. The current design can't handle the heat generated. During operation, I'm modifying it to improve efficiency. Richard didn't respond right away. He glanced at the engine, then back at Laura. For the first time, he noticed something different about her. Gone was the quiet assistant who rarely spoke unless spoken to. In her place was a woman who exuded confidence and determination. It was a side of her he hadn't seen before, and it intrigued him. Well, he said after a pause, keep me updated. With that, he turned and left the lab. Over the next few days, Laura threw herself into her work. She requested additional materials from the supply department, explaining that she needed specific parts to complete her modifications. The engineers who processed her requests were surprised by her knowledge. One of them even commented, "You really know your stuff, don't you?" Laura smiled politely. "It's just something I enjoy doing." Her evenings were spent in her garage, refining her designs and testing prototypes. She barely slept, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. Despite the long hours, she felt energized. Every small success brought her closer to solving the problem, and every challenge pushed her to think creatively. Back at the office, rumors continued to swirl. Some people admired Laura's dedication, while others remained skeptical. Among them was Daniel Hayes, one of the lead engineers on the Phoenix engine project. Daniel had been humiliated when the engine failed during the demonstration, and he resented Laura for stepping in. He believed she was only making things worse and often muttered complaints to his colleagues. "She has no idea what she's doing," Daniel said one day during lunch. "This is way above her skill level." His co-workers exchanged glances but didn't argue. They weren't sure what to believe anymore. Laura's progress seemed promising, but they couldn't shake off their doubts. Despite the negativity, Laura stayed focused. She refused to let anyone discourage her. Every time someone questioned her abilities, she used it as motivation to prove them wrong. Slowly but surely, she began to earn respect from those around her. One evening, Richard returned to the lab. He had been thinking about Laura's project and decided to take another look. When he arrived, he found her explaining a technical concept to a group of engineers. They listened intently, nodding as she pointed out flaws in the original design and described her proposed improvements. Richard leaned against the doorway, unnoticed by the group. He listened as Laura spoke with authority, her words precise and clear. She wasn't just guessing. She truly understood the mechanics of the engine. As he watched, a flicker of admiration crossed his face. For the first time, he realized he might have misjudged her. When the discussion ended, Laura noticed Richard standing there. She hesitated, unsure what to expect, but instead of criticizing her, he simply said, "Keep going. You're doing good. Work." Those words meant more to Laura than she expected. For so long, she had kept her talents hidden, afraid of being judged or dismissed. Now she was finally being recognized, not just by anyone, but by the man who had once doubted her. As the week drew to a close, Laura completed her modifications. She double-checked every connection, tightened every bolt, and tested each component. Everything seemed to be in order. The final step was to power up the engine and see if her changes worked. On Friday afternoon, she sent an email to Richard, informing him that the Phoenix engine was ready for another test run. The message was short and professional, but her hands trembled as she hit send. She knew this was her moment, the culmination of countless hours of hard work and determination. Richard read the email and immediately called a meeting. He announced that the engine would be tested again the following Monday. The news spread quickly and anticipation filled the air. Everyone wondered if Laura had actually managed to fix the impossible machine, or if she had set herself up for failure. That weekend, Laura tried to relax, but her mind kept racing. She replayed every step she had taken, analyzing every decision she had made. She knew there was always a chance something could go wrong, but she trusted her instincts. She had done everything she could, and now all she could do was wait. On Monday morning, the conference room was packed. Engineers, executives, and reporters filled the space, eager to witness the outcome. Cameras flashed as Richard stepped forward to introduce the demonstration. He gave a brief speech, praising the team's efforts and acknowledging the challenges they had faced. Then it was Laura's turn. She walked to the front of the room, her heart pounding. All eyes were on her, and for a moment she felt overwhelmed. But then she remembered why she was there, not to prove herself to others, but to show herself what she was capable of. With a deep breath, Laura signaled for the engine to be powered up. The room fell silent as the machine roared to life. At first, nothing seemed different, but then something incredible happened. The engine ran smoothly without a single hiccup. The monitors displayed stable readings and the temperature gauge remained perfectly balanced. Cheers erupted throughout the room. People clapped and shouted, congratulating Laura on her success. Even Daniel Hayes, who had doubted her until the very end, offered a reluctant nod of approval. Richard approached Laura, his face breaking into a wide grin. "You did it," he said, shaking her hand. "You actually fixed it." Laura smiled, relief washing over her. "Thank you for giving me the chance," she replied. In that moment, everything changed. Laura wasn't just an administrative assistant anymore. She had proven herself to be a mechanical genius, someone whose skills rivaled, even surpassed those of the top engineers at Titan Tech. And Richard, who had once underestimated her, now saw her in a completely new light. The success of the Phoenix engine sent shockwaves through Titan Tech. Laura's achievement was the talk of the office, and her name became synonymous with brilliance. People who had once dismissed her as just another assistant now looked at her with admiration and a hint of awe. The engineers who had worked on the project were both impressed and humbled by her ability to solve a problem that had stumped them all. Richard Carter, the CEO, couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He replayed the events in his mind over and over again. How had he missed it? How had he failed to see the incredible talent sitting right under his nose? Laura wasn't just good at her job. She was extraordinary. Her quiet demeanor had hidden a sharp mind and an unmatched skill set, and Richard couldn't shake the feeling that he had misjudged her entirely. That same week, Richard called Laura into his office. It was a spacious room with large windows overlooking the city skyline. Laura walked in nervously, unsure why she had been summoned. She had already received congratulations from her coworkers and even a few reporters, but this felt different. Richard's expression was serious, and Laura braced herself for whatever he might say. "Take a seat," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Laura sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened," he continued. "You fixed something none of my top engineers could. That's impressive." Laura nodded, unsure how to respond. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just did what I thought was right." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her. "But how did you know how to do it? You're not an engineer, at least not officially. Where did you learn all of this?" Laura hesitated for a moment before answering. She had kept her passion for mechanics private for so long, and now she was being asked to explain it. "My father was a mechanic," she began. "He taught me everything he knew when I was growing up. I loved taking things apart and figuring out how they worked. Later, I studied mechanical engineering in college, but life got in the way." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I ended up working here as an assistant because I needed stability, but I never stopped tinkering with machines in my free time." Richard listened intently, his curiosity growing. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. "You could have joined the engineering team years ago," Laura shrugged. "I didn't think anyone would take me seriously. I figured it was easier to stay in the background." Richard frowned, realizing how much his own attitude might have contributed to her decision. He had always assumed people fit neatly into certain roles. Assistants did paperwork, engineers built machines, and CEOs made decisions. Laura didn't fit into any of those boxes. and he had overlooked her potential because of it. "Well," Richard said after a moment, "you've proven yourself now, and I want to make sure we don't waste your talent. I'd like to offer you a position on the engineering team." Laura blinked in surprise. "On the engineering team?" "Yes," Richard replied. "Your skills are too valuable to ignore. We need someone like you, someone who can think outside the box and solve problems others can't. What do you say?" Laura hesitated. This was an opportunity she had dreamed of for years, but it also meant stepping into the spotlight completely. She wouldn't be able to hide anymore. Still, she knew she couldn't pass it up. "I'll do it," she said finally. "Thank you." Richard smiled, looking genuinely pleased. "Good. Welcome to the team." Over the next few weeks, Laura settled into her new role. It wasn't easy at first. She had to adjust to working alongside the same engineers who had once doubted her abilities. Some of them were supportive, eager to learn from her expertise. Others, like Daniel Hayes, still struggled to accept her presence. But Laura didn't let their attitudes bother her. She focused on her work, determined to prove herself once again. Her first assignment was to help design a new prototype for a solar-powered generator. It was a challenging project, but Laura threw herself into it with enthusiasm. She spent hours sketching designs, running simulations, and collaborating with her teammates. Her contributions quickly earned their respect, and even Daniel began to soften his stance. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprints in the lab, Laura noticed something unusual. A minor calculation in the design seemed off, and if left unchecked, it could cause serious issues later on. She pointed it out to the team, explaining her reasoning in clear, simple terms. At first, some of them dismissed her concerns, insisting that the numbers were correct. But Laura refused to back down. "I'm telling you, this isn't going to work," she said firmly. "If we don't fix it now, we'll regret it later." Reluctantly, the team agreed to double-check the calculations. To their surprise, Laura was right. The error would have led to a catastrophic failure during testing. From that day forward, no one questioned her judgment again. As Laura gained confidence in her new role, she also began to form stronger connections with her colleagues. She discovered that many of them shared her passion for innovation and problem-solving. They started inviting her to brainstorming sessions and lunch outings, treating her as an equal rather than an outsider. For the first time in years, Laura felt like she belonged. Richard kept a close eye on her progress, often stopping by the lab to check in. He was fascinated by her approach to engineering, her creativity, her attention to detail, and her ability to simplify complex concepts. More than once, he found himself asking for her opinion on other projects, valuing her input more than he cared to admit. Their relationship began to change as well. Richard no longer saw Laura as just an employee. He saw her as a peer, someone whose insights he trusted. He made a conscious effort to treat her with respect, acknowledging her contributions in meetings and praising her publicly whenever possible. It wasn't just about making amends, it was about recognizing her worth. Despite her growing responsibilities, Laura never lost sight of who she was. She still spent weekends in her garage, tinkering with old machines and experimenting with new ideas. It was her way of staying grounded, reminding herself of where she had come from. Occasionally, Richard would visit her there, curious to see what she was working on. He admired her dedication and marveled at the way she brought broken things back to life. "You're amazing, you know that," he said one evening, watching her repair a vintage motorcycle. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you," Laura laughed, brushing grease off her hands. "I'm just doing what I love," she replied. "It's not that big of a deal. It is to me," Richard said quietly. "You've changed the way I look at things, not just engineering, but people too. I used to think everyone fit into neat little categories, but you don't fit anywhere, and that's what makes you special." Laura smiled, touched by his words. She realized that Richard wasn't just paying her a compliment, he was admitting his own mistakes. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from a man who rarely showed weakness, and Laura appreciated it. As months passed, Titan Tech continued to thrive under Laura's influence. Her innovations helped the company secure several high-profile contracts, and her reputation grew beyond the walls of the office. Reporters wrote articles about her, calling her a hidden genius and a trailblazer for women in STEM. Laura tried to stay humble, deflecting praise whenever possible. But deep down, she felt proud of what she had accomplished. Still, she knew there was more work to be done. The world was full of challenges waiting to be solved, and Laura was ready to take them on. With her talent, determination, and newfound confidence, she was unstoppable. And Richard, who had once dared her to fix an impossible engine, now stood beside her as an ally, a testament to how far they had both come. Little did they know, their journey was far from over. New opportunities and new obstacles lay ahead, promising to test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, they were content to celebrate their victories and embrace the future together. As the weeks turned into months, Laura Bennett became an integral part of Titan Tech Industries. Her name was no longer just a whisper in the office. It was spoken with respect and admiration. People sought her advice on projects, relied on her expertise to solve problems, and looked up to her as a leader. Laura's presence had transformed the company, not just because of her technical skills, but also because of the way she inspired others to think differently. Richard Carter noticed the change too. The once arrogant CEO had softened over time, thanks in large part to Laura's influence. He still pushed his team hard, but he also listened more carefully to their ideas. He credited Laura for teaching him the value of humility and open-mindedness. Their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual trust and respect. But despite the progress they had made, challenges were never far away. One day, Richard called Laura into his office with urgent news. "We've been approached by a major client," he explained, handing her a folder filled with documents. "They want us to develop a new type of engine, one that runs entirely on renewable energy." Laura flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the specifications. The project sounded ambitious, even for Titan Tech. "This is going to be tough," she said after a moment. "But if we pull it off, it could revolutionize the industry." "That's why I'm putting you in charge," Richard replied. "You're the only person I trust to lead this." Laura felt a mix of excitement and pressure. Leading such a high-stakes project was both an honor and a risk. If she succeeded, it would cement her reputation as one of the best engineers in the field. But failure could undo everything she had worked so hard to achieve. "I'll do my best," she said finally, meeting Richard's gaze. "But I'll need your support and the team's to make this happen." "You have it," Richard assured her. "Whatever resources you need, just ask." With Richard's backing, Laura assembled a team of the brightest minds at Titan Tech. She handpicked individuals who shared her passion for innovation and weren't afraid to take risks. Together, they set to work designing the new engine. Laura encouraged collaboration, fostering an environment where everyone felt comfortable sharing their ideas. She knew that creativity thrived when people worked together, and she wanted every member of the team to feel valued. The project quickly became all-consuming. Days blurred into nights as the team brainstormed, tested prototypes, and analyzed data. Laura spent long hours in the lab, often skipping meals or sleep to meet deadlines. Her dedication inspired the others to push themselves harder than ever before. One evening, as the team gathered around a table littered with blueprints and coffee cups, Laura presented her latest concept. "What if we use a hybrid system?" she suggested. "We combine solar power with kinetic energy generated by motion. That way, the engine can recharge itself while operating." The room fell silent as everyone considered her idea. It was bold, unconventional, and exactly the kind of solution Titan Tech needed. Slowly, nods of approval spread around the table. "It's risky," Daniel Hayes admitted, speaking up for the first time in a while. "But it might actually work." Laura smiled, grateful for his support. Over time, Daniel had come to respect her abilities, and though he still struggled with pride, he had learned to appreciate her contributions. "Let's give it a shot," she said confidently. "If we fail, we'll try something else." The team got to work immediately. building a prototype based on Laura's design. They faced countless setbacks along the way. Components that didn't fit, calculations that didn't add up, and tests that ended in disappointment. But each failure brought them closer to success. Laura reminded the team to stay patient and persistent, drawing on her own experiences of trial and error in her garage. Richard checked in regularly, offering encouragement and ensuring the team had everything they needed. He marveled at how seamlessly Laura managed the group, balancing technical expertise with emotional intelligence. She knew when to push harder and when to let people breathe, creating a dynamic that kept everyone motivated. After months of relentless effort, the prototype was finally ready for testing. The entire company gathered in the main conference room, eager to see the results. Reporters and representatives from the client company filled the space, cameras flashing as anticipation reached a fever pitch. Laura stood at the front of the room, her heart pounding. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of months of hard work. She glanced at Richard, who gave her a reassuring nod. Then she signaled for the engine to be powered up. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The room grew tense as seconds ticked by in silence. Just as whispers of doubt began to spread, the engine roared to life. A collective gasp filled the air as monitors displayed stable readings, confirming that the machine was running smoothly on renewable energy alone. Cheers erupted throughout the room. People clapped and shouted, congratulating Laura and her team on their groundbreaking achievement. The client representatives were ecstatic, already discussing plans for mass production. For TitanTech, it was a monumental victory, one that solidified its place as a leader in sustainable technology. Later that evening, Richard hosted a celebration in the office. Food and drinks were laid out on long tables, and music played softly in the background. Employees mingled, laughing and sharing stories about the project. Laura found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of whom thanked her for inspiring them to aim higher. Richard approached her with a glass of champagne in hand. "To Laura," he said, raising his glass. "Without you, none of this would have been possible." Laura blushed, feeling overwhelmed by the praise. "It wasn't just me," she insisted. "Everyone played a part." "Maybe," Richard replied with a smile. "But you were the heart of it. Don't forget that." As the night wore on, Laura reflected on how far she had come. From being an overlooked assistant to leading a revolutionary project, she had defied expectations at every turn. Yet she knew this wasn't the end of her journey, it was only the beginning. In the corner of the room, Daniel Hayes raised his glass to her. "You really are something else," he said sincerely. "I'm glad you're on our side." Laura grinned, touched by his words. "Thanks, Daniel. That means a lot." The next morning, Laura returned to her desk, ready to tackle whatever came next. She knew there would always be new challenges to face, but she welcomed them eagerly. After all, solving problems was what she loved most. Richard joined her shortly after, carrying a stack of papers. "Here's your next assignment," he said, placing them in front of her. "Another impossible project, of course." Laura laughed, flipping through the documents. "When are you going to stop giving me these?" "When you stop succeeding," Richard replied with a wink, "which will probably never happen." For a moment, they shared a look of understanding. Neither of them had expected their paths to cross in this way, but they were grateful for the journey they had taken together. Through challenges and triumphs, they had grown, not just as professionals, but as people. As Laura dove into her new task, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. She had proven herself to the world, but more importantly, she had proven herself to herself. And with Richard's support, she knew there was no limit to what she could achieve. Little did they know, their greatest challenge was yet to come. But for now, they reveled in their victories, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The success of the renewable energy engine brought TitanTech Industries to new heights. The company became a household name, celebrated for its innovative approach to solving global challenges. Laura Bennett's role in the project earned her Widespread recognition, not just within the company but across the engineering community. She was invited to speak at conferences, featured in magazines, and even received awards for her contributions to sustainable technology. Yet, despite the accolades, Laura remained grounded. Her focus wasn't on fame or glory, it was on making a difference. Richard Carter also found himself changing in ways he hadn't anticipated. For years, he had prided himself on being a visionary leader, someone who pushed boundaries and demanded excellence. But Laura had taught him that leadership wasn't just about setting goals. It was about empowering others to reach them. He began to see his employees not as tools to achieve success, but as individuals with unique talents and ideas. Under his guidance, Titan Tech fostered a culture of collaboration and innovation, one that attracted top talent from around the world. But as much as things had improved, life at Titan Tech wasn't without its challenges. Just when the company seemed to be hitting its stride, a new crisis emerged. A rival firm accused Titan Tech of stealing their design for the renewable energy engine. The allegations were false. Laura and her team had developed the technology entirely on their own. But the media frenzy threatened to tarnish the company's reputation. Richard called an emergency meeting to address the situation. "We need to fight back," he said, his voice firm. "This is baseless and we can't let it go unanswered." Laura nodded in agreement. "They're trying to discredit us because they're afraid of what we've achieved. But the truth is on our side." Together, they devised a plan. Richard handled the legal aspects, working with lawyers to gather evidence proving Titan Tech's innocence. Meanwhile, Laura took charge of the technical defense, meticulously documenting every step of the engine's development. It was a painstaking process, requiring her to dig through months of notes, emails, and prototypes. But Laura didn't mind. She knew how important it was to protect the team's hard work. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Reporters camped outside the office asking relentless questions. Social media buzzed with speculation, some people quick to believe the worst. Even some of Titan Tech's clients began to waver, unsure whether to continue their partnerships. One evening after another long day of work, Richard found Laura in the lab. She was hunched over her laptop, reviewing files and cross-referencing data. Her face was pale, dark circles underlining her tired eyes. Richard felt a pang of guilt. He had always admired Laura's determination, but now he realized how much she was sacrificing for the company. "You should go home," he said gently. "You've been working nonstop." Laura shook her head. "I can't stop now. Not when so much is at stake." "I know," Richard replied, "but you're no good to anyone if you burn yourself out. Take a break, at least for tonight." For a moment, Laura hesitated. Then she sighed and closed her laptop. "Maybe you're right," she admitted. "I could use some rest." Richard smiled. "Good. Let me drive you home." On the way to Laura's apartment, they talked about everything except work. They shared stories about their childhoods, their dreams, and the moments that had shaped them. Richard confessed that he had once doubted his ability to lead Titan Tech, fearing he wasn't smart enough to keep up with the engineers. Laura listened, intently, touched by his honesty. When they reached her building, Laura turned to him. "Thank you for everything. I don't think I'd have made it this far without your support." Richard chuckled softly. "The truth is, I'm the one who owes you. You've changed this company and me in ways I never expected." Their friendship had grown stronger over time, built on mutual respect and trust. Though neither of them would admit it, there was something more between them, something deeper than just professional admiration. But for now, they were content to leave it unspoken, focusing instead on the challenges ahead. The next morning, Titan Tech released its response to the accusations. Laura presented a detailed timeline of the engine's development, complete with supporting documents and testimonies. From the team, Richard addressed the press, his tone calm but resolute. "These claims are baseless," he declared. "We have always operated with integrity, and we will defend ourselves against these false allegations." The public reaction was mixed. At first, But as more evidence surfaced, the tide began to turn. Experts analyzed the data and confirmed that TitanTech's design was original. Slowly, the accusations lost credibility, and the rival firm withdrew its complaint. Though the crisis had been averted, it left a lasting impact on everyone at the company. They realized how fragile success could be, and how quickly reputations could be tarnished. But it also strengthened their resolve. Laura and Richard vowed to ensure that TitanTech remained a beacon of innovation and ethics, setting an example for others to follow. In the months that followed, Laura continued to push boundaries. She led several new projects, each one more ambitious than the last. One initiative focused on developing affordable clean energy solutions for underserved communities. Another aimed to create advanced robotics for disaster relief efforts. Her passion for helping others inspired those around her, reminding them why they had chosen careers in engineering. Richard supported her every step of the way, trusting her instincts and encouraging her creativity. He often joked that Laura was the real CEO of TitanTech, given how much influence she wielded. But deep down, he meant it as a compliment. He knew that without her, the company wouldn't be where it was today. Despite her busy schedule, Laura still found time for her personal projects. Her garage remained her sanctuary, a place where she could experiment freely without constraints. Sometimes Richard joined her, marveling at her ability to bring broken things back to life. Watching her work reminded him of why he admired her so much, not just for her brilliance but for her resilience and humility. One evening, as they sat together in her garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished machines, Richard broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't dared you to fix that engine?" Laura laughed softly. "All the time. I probably would have stayed in the background, happy to keep things running smoothly. But I'm glad it worked out this way." "Me too," Richard said. "You've done incredible things, Laura, and I have no doubt you'll keep doing them." Laura smiled, feeling a sense of peace. She had come a long way from the quiet assistant who blended into the background. Now she stood tall, proud of who she was and what she had achieved. She knew there would always be obstacles to overcome, but she faced them with confidence, knowing she wasn't alone. As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light through the garage windows, Laura and Richard raised their coffee mugs in a silent toast. They didn't need words to express what they felt, a shared understanding that they had embarked on a journey neither of them could have predicted. Together they had built something extraordinary, not just a company but a legacy. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: whatever challenges lay in wait, they would face them side by side.